Hello, and welcome to the Disability Myth. My name is Dominic, and I live with a fatal disease called spinal muscular atrophy. Together, my amazing caretaker, co-host, and best friend, Uriel, and I plan to debunk misconceptions, share our personal experiences, and shatter your expectations. But we're not stopping there. We're bringing in experts, thought leaders, and everyday people who are smashing through societal barriers, paving the way for a more inclusive world. Whether you're tuning in to learn, empathize, or simply to be entertained, the show promises to be an eye-opening experience that transcends boundaries. Because when it comes down to it, what makes us different is what makes us extraordinary. Well, hello there, and welcome back to
Hi.
another episode of the Disability Myth. I am, of course, your handsome, your humble, and hammy host, Dominic Trevathan. Alongside me, as always, the equally handsome, humble, and hammy, Uriel. How you doing today, bro?
I'm pretty good. My brain's a little fried, but it's all right.
Oh yeah, tell the peeps what you've been
Uh,
up to, your latest venture.
uh, I'm not sure what I'm doing with my life.
Does anybody?
But I decided to take a crack at some medical stuff. I decided to take anatomy and see how I flow. I'll either float or swim, see how it goes. So far, it's pretty cool, but it's also a little stressful because it's a lot of information all at once. And I'm like, oh, and I have to brush up on everything. I have to brush up on my cells. And luckily I remember like epidermis, dermis. Yeah, I mean, it gets more complicated than that, but I'm like, oh no. All right.
My one piece of advice, you may have heard it before. Mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell.
Powerhouse of the cell, yeah. Yeah, yes, it is. Yeah, yeah, baby. I was reviewing cells and how muscle cells are elongated and they contract. That's crazy.
Hella sick. All right, and today we
Oh
have
yeah. We have a special
another
guest.
special
Ooh, I'm excited.
guest.
Yeah.
Clap, clap, clap.
She's been there since
Uh,
day one.
yeah, big number one fan of ours. Yep. A good friend of mine, a coworker of mine in Kay Richmond, certified recreation therapist. So welcome on, Kay. How you doing today?
Well, I am just so excited to be here with you too, and really honored to be asked to be on your podcast.
Oh shucks, you're gonna make me blush.
It's always a
Okay.
fun time with the K.
Oh yeah.
Yep, we do. We have a good time.
All right, let's jump into some icebreakers. Get to know
Oh
each
yeah.
other a little bit. Get a little bit more comfy. All right. So, as always, we gotta go with the big hitters first.
All right.
Pineapple on pizza or no pineapple on pizza?
Definitely pineapple on pizza
Oh no.
Definitely.
or
Wow.
just
Oh,
pineapple.
Or just
just
okay.
pineapple.
Yeah, just give me
That's
the
different.
pineapple.
I think
Yeah.
that's fine. I feel like I always have a regular response to this, and you're very anti pineapple, huh, Dom?
I'm just not a big fruit kind of guy. Yeah, like I eat apples and oranges, not even oranges. I eat apples, bananas, um, pears, grapes, but I literally do
No, that's
not,
a lot. You ate
huh?
probably like for the first time when I took you to that one place. It's like,
Yeah.
whoa, what is that? Yeah, I had to explain to you what a pear was. You remember that?
I was like, I probably yeah. I've eaten pears before, but like I don't eat them very often. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Like,
they're 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 okay.
but Kay, why pineapple? What about it? You just like the taste? You just
Yeah, we kind of go with the Hawaiian pineapple pizza thing, and then it's just goes down just right. But other than that, I haven't given it a whole lot of thought.
oh, that's fine. I mean, if you like it, you like it,
I like it.
Have you ever like seen those pina coladas that people make with the pineapple as the cup? I saw
Oh,
somebody
yes. Yes, yes, yes.
I
Yeah.
saw somebody do it on like a New Year's Eve show. They had a whole pineapple with the pina
It's like a
colada
mixed
in it.
drink. Yeah, they hollow out the pineapple and they put the alcohol and whatnot in there.
Yeah.
All right. Yuri, I'll make a note for Dom's next birthday.
Oh, you want a pina colada? Sure.
Let's do
I'll
it.
try.
All right, on to the next. Speaking of drinks, Coke or Pepsi?
Oh,
So yes, I am a Diet Coke fan, although trying to really discontinue that, but it's always been Coke. Yep,
For sure, for sure.
yep.
Is it a family thing
No,
where
I'm
you're
the only one in our family that drinks
So why is that?
soda. Why?
Yeah, we need
Um,
to know the people need to know, okay?
I don't know. You guys are asking really hard questions like that
This is just the beginning. These are just the
I've
icebreakers.
never pondered. Um, so, and if we were seeing each other, you would see that I have like a huge bottle of water. So I really am trying to embrace the concept of water versus Coke.
good.
I could
Yeah.
learn a thing or two about that, yeah.
There you go.
I have an iced tea next to me.
That sweet tea.
Oh, it's not too sweet, but yeah. I was just curious because like my parents grew up drinking a lot of Coke, and we always had Coke in the house, but I've always preferred the taste of Pepsi because when you grow up drinking so much Coke, Pepsi's a little exotic, foreign. It's like, oh, this is different, you know.
Actually, that's funny. My mom did drink Diet Pepsi.
Oh,
Yeah, there you go. Had to go a different direction.
yeah. Well, I mean, that's
Beginning
how.
to sense a pattern.
I mean, I think that's just how young people are a little contrarian to what their parents like, you know.
Well, fortunately, my kids aren't following after me. They don't drink sodas, so
Oh,
they're
there you go, contrarian. It's just like,
they're doing
okay,
good. Yes.
that's good. Cool. How did you and Dom meet?
Well, I believe we met through the junior wheelchair sports camp. I was helping out with the camp, and had come, and I met him kind of briefly there. He had been involved with the camp years before I was involved with it. And then I knew of his um, skills that he already had, and then he really put into place during COVID related to technology and helping people get connected online. And he helped Cottage Rehabilitation Hospital, the therapeutic recreation program, with their virtual programs that really got underway pretty quickly and helped connect the kids in a virtual camp and our adults through something called Hot on Life. And so that was just completely novel and impressive to me. And then lo and behold, our daughter's wedding ended up being, during the whole lockdown period. So there were 7 of us gathered in Spokane, Washington for a very beautiful wedding. And I enlisted Dom's skills to bring our entire family across the country together. And I'm going to get tearful because that was huge. Thank you, Dom.
No, that was good times. That was fun.
Yeah. And then, thankfully, Renee Van Horn, who I runs the therapeutic recreation program at Cottage Rehab, she um, suggested the idea of bringing Dom on as a co-host to our Outlook Speaker Series, which Dom and I started 3+ years, I think,
That's crazy.
ago.
Time
And
flies.
every month we get together and host and hear from different speakers, and we have different topics. And so that's been just a great joy. And then Dom and I live close to each other in Solvang, California. And when we can, we get together and cruise the streets and go get some good food or something in town. So,
AKA gelato.
oh yeah. Yeah, actually the owner, he wants us back there. We got to get back there, Dom.
Gotta go get more gelato.
Oh,
Yes.
is that the new gelato place across the street from the hotel?
I believe it's called Via
Yes.
Gelateria.
There you go.
Yeah, okay.
Shout out Via Gelateria.
It's awesome.
Okay.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's where I saw Dom really in action when he elevated his power wheelchair so that he could get kind of a bird's eye view into the gelato case and
Well,
really,
yeah, because like whenever we go into places like ice cream shops, gelato shops, like a lot of just buildings, they're not necessarily designed for, short people such as myself. So I will elevate my chair using the hydraulics, and I that way I can get a good look at the selection.
yeah, yep, that was smart.
All right, final little icebreaker for you, Kay. Thank you for the awesome words about how cool I am. I appreciate that. You're very cool yourself.
Well, hey, and then I nominated you for an award that
I
you
know.
got.
I just, yeah, I'm rolling in the accolades because of you. I really am. Okay. Best piece of advice you've ever been given.
So one that comes to mind often, and I've shared it with our children, but is in specific related to when you travel, to expect the unexpected and always have your backup plans in mind and to keep your head clear. So that came from my father, and this was back when I was in college and I had an opportunity to travel to Europe. And my parents were really excited for me. They took me to LA Airport, and this, was a huge deal for all of us. And they got my baggage, and I actually saw my baggage get loaded. And then they came and told me there was no room for me on the plane, that they had overbooked it. And
What?
so I started to sort of come unglued because I already had friends in London waiting for me. And my father, just a combination of tough love and huge amount of compassion, told me to buck up, and that we needed to problem solve it through. And so we did manage to get another flight. We got my luggage off. We got another flight. They figured they would, follow up with a travel agent and deal with it, but get me on a flight. And then I kept saying in my head, to just stay calm and just expect the unexpected. While on the flight to London, I found out that the flight was actually going to a different city.
Oh,
And then I thought I was going to be going to. So at that point, I had a crying child and an Italian speaking man next to me. I thought, well, it's okay if I cry a little bit, and then and then I'll buck up. And so I did. And then from then on, I've just really resonated that, we can all have our certain plans in mind, especially even like when you think of people in our health. We all have plans, and things change unexpectedly. So I always like to have plan B, C, and D in my back pocket.
that's a very good idea. Yeah. All right. Well, yeah, thanks for sharing all that. I think on that note, that's kind of a nice little segue dealing with that kind of adversity. Go and talking about our myth for today. You know, living with a disability can be discouraging. And I think it's safe to say that people with disabilities no doubt go through stuff on a daily basis that really challenges them. And especially for those that are newly injured too. For instance, people with spinal cord injuries, TBI, traumatic brain injury. And so I think when, you know, we're approached with the opportunity to engage in recreational therapy, as a patient, we might overlook the role that doing things we really enjoy can play in the overall rehabilitative process. Um, when I was 14, no, when I was 13, I was recovering from my spinal fusion surgery. And at one point, 2 months in, I got moved to a rehab hospital in Downey called Rancho Los Amigos. And I spent a month there rehabbing. And a big part of it, besides, what was it like learning how to eat again, learning how to talk again, because for 2 months I just couldn't talk or hardly eat anything other than pureed food because of my newly implanted trach. And Yeah, so that was like a really big challenge, big change for me in my life. Really, really dark time for me personally. And all of a sudden, I got confronted with this recreational therapist when I was at Rancho Los Amigos. And as a 13-year-old, especially, I was just not into it. I'm just like, what is a recreation therapist? Like, that sounds made up, you know? Like,
Yeah,
what the heck?
really,
And
that's a thing.
yeah, and I was just, you know, kind of neutral towards her and, the activities she would have us do until one day she got a bus to take everyone in our like ward to the mall. And we got to go to like GameStop and get games and get like Wetzel's pretzels. And so like that whole kind of day stands out in memory to me because it just made me feel normal. Like I wasn't dealing with rehabbing from a serious surgery, and I forgot about my trach. I forgot about my ventilator. I
Wow.
just got to be a kid, right? And so that's just kind of my little story connection to this whole myth and process. Like, I really think people should approach recreational therapy with an open mindset, even if it might not be so easy to do so given your circumstances.
Well, Dom, I don't think I had fully heard that, your story and your experience there. And yeah, I have to say, I work in physical rehabilitation, so the same kind of place where you were at. And when I first go in to meet with a patient and I say what I am, a recreation therapist, oftentimes I am, expecting that they'll go, what? Like, what is that? And so I always do explain, and no patient ever is required to have that service as part of their rehab. But I've been doing this since the late 70s. And so I have, the whole range of reactions and responses, but I would have to say really overwhelmingly, people, once they understand and once they experience some of the things that they can do, they really, um, find that it's helpful to be involved with what we are offering.
Yeah, I totally agree. I just thinking about what you said, like when you think of therapy, people think either, um talking with a psychologist or physical therapy, even like occupational therapy, but I think recreation therapy is one that's often left out. Um, so yeah, do you want to get into our first major question of the day, buddy?
Oh yeah. How did you get into recreational therapy?
Well, first of all, as growing up and through school and, high school and things, I'd never heard of recreational therapy. I actually, first time I ever heard it was when I was in college. Um, and now many years, later, and as I went into that profession, I realized I was really wired. I was really raised to become and do exactly what I do. And so it's just really an inherent part of my belief system to be able to hopefully connect with people and help them find their abilities, their strengths through recreation. And so if you're good with it, I'll share a little bit about my upbringing and
Yeah,
why I have this lens of optimism in my belief system.
please do.
All right. Well, as I said, I'd never heard of this profession. As a kid, I grew up, I have five older brothers and was raised by two amazing parents. And my father he used a wheelchair for his mobility. He had gotten polio at the age of 30. He was a major in the Army and he had come home from leave. And again, this is all stories I was told, because I was not born yet, but he came home from leave and he went to go play golf, something he loved doing, but he wasn't feeling well and he fell down and he never walked again. He went to Walter Reed Hospital for his rehabilitation and was there with other, servicemen. And a good friend of his was actually in the iron lung. My dad was in the iron lung for a while.
Can you
Um,
like explain what that is to people that might not be aware? The iron lung.
so in that time period, actually, yeah, in that time period, you would actually be encased in a huge piece of equipment that would keep you breathing. And that's a very rough description of it, but
Yeah.
the intent was to keep the person alive, keep them breathing. So fortunately, my dad worked through that time period and worked through his rehab. My mom was there literally by his side working with him as well. But also at that same time, one of my older brothers, I think he's like 4 or 5 years older than I am, he also had polio. He was an infant. And then my mother's brother also had polio. So I just can't even fathom what life was like for my mother and for my two oldest brothers at that time. They were toddlers. So a lot going on in the family. But then, I came on the scene quite a few years later. My parents had moved to California so that they didn't have to deal with life in the snow in a wheelchair. And
I can't imagine what that would be like. That would suck.
yeah, so that was a smart move. My dad wasn't in the military anymore, so he was able to launch into the private sector and get into um work and rate, because he was the breadwinner for the family. And I came on the scene. I was number six. And so literally I did not like my whole life, I never viewed that my dad being in a wheelchair was different. Um, my dad was in a wheelchair. He was the most able man that I knew. He was a great father, a great husband, a great leader, he helped start our many programs in our community.
Yeah.
He couldn't do things anymore, but I never saw what he couldn't do. And when you talk about, I think we're touching base something about how people get discouraged. Honestly, the only thing I ever witnessed my dad get completely frustrated over was when I would leave my shoes in, in the bathroom that we shared, and he could not reach them or push himself over them. And that just and I thought it's such a little thing, my shoes in the way, but it
Yeah.
was just complete frustration for him when he just needed to take care of his basic needs. So I finally got the hint on that one. But um, otherwise, somehow he just would teach us all. He was, obviously he was a great thinker. He was a great teacher. He was really good with teaching my brothers how to build and how to um, I don't know why. I think about this now. Like, why in the world did my parents buy property on a hill?
Yeah, that's not a whole lot of, you know, foresight going on there.
They terraced it and made it so when they put in a pool, this is back a long time ago, but they put in a pool. Oh, that's right. I was telling you guys the other day to get my dad in and out of the pool. They didn't have a Hoyer lift then, so they got a bomb hoist, and that's how we would get my dad in and out of the pool.
And that's when we said, what the hell is a bomb hoist?
Yeah, that's
Oh
just
yeah.
how you lift a bomb. But my dad, that's how we lifted him. He would put him in a sling and then he would get in and out of the pool that way. But other than that, I mean, yeah, that's kind of odd. But other than that, I mean, he swam like crazy. And that's where I really saw like the power of water in healing. Like every summer when we could get in the pool, he could get in. I would see his legs that were normally very full of fluid. They had a lot of edema. Um, they would go back to normal and they would look great because the hydrostatic pressure of the pool water and being in there and swimming would improve his health so much every summer. So I just witnessed, firsthand what somebody who did use a wheelchair could do. I mean, we would camp at high elevation. He would get himself right into the river or near the river to go fishing. He would teach us how to, set up the tent and do all of that. He would take care of, he had to use a commode out in the wild and we'd give him some privacy and, all those personal needs still had to be taken care of, but that's just what he did and the way we all rolled. So I think just witnessing that, seeing him, like, he was the best ping pong player, nobody could beat him. He taught me cribbage. I think of all these things I do with patients. Like he taught me cribbage. He taught, um, my parents gave us a chance to do a lot of outdoor things. And I saw I think about it now, the healing benefits of a lot of those things, not only for him, but for our whole family.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I think watching my mom later in life when my dad he started having heart problems and um COPD and some other things. Otherwise, he was healthy from the time he had polio. And, I listened to one of your last podcasts where you mentioned, or I think your speaker talked about how she had been given, grim prognosis for her
Yeah.
welfare. And my dad had been given the same thing, saying, he wouldn't live past 40 because that's what they thought at that time.
Mhm.
And then that was just like for him, from what I understand, he and my mom, they were like, yeah, no way. We're going for this. And they did. And my dad was healthy until his 60s.
Wow. That's
And
really
if we
cool.
knew, if we knew, if, we had known more about nutrition and exercise and heart health, for him, he would have lived longer, I'm sure.
Hmm.
But so anybody listening to this, I really, no matter how much of your body and mind you're able to use whatever you can, and especially try to focus on the nutrition and staying as mobile as you can. I know that he would have lived longer. Anyway, I watched my mom, like how she used activity and engaged in things that helped her cope and helped her emotionally. So when he was in the hospital, he was in ICU for a very long time. And, we would go every day. And at one point, my mom said, I signed you and I up for a craft class. And it's at night, and we're going to go for a few hours.
Hmm.
And I was kind of upset with her because I'm like, wait, we can't leave dad.
Yeah, that's so random. Yeah.
And I'm like, but then I kind of realized my mom was really needing me. And so we went to this class and she was really good at all that kind of stuff. I wasn't, but I watched her and she was just so like in the moment, involved with what she was doing. And then she created these beautiful Christmas wreaths and things like that. It was around Christmas time. And then a while later, she said to me, she goes, I needed to give my mind a break.
Mm.
Needed to not be worrying. I needed to not be focused on everything that's stressful. So right there, like what a huge example that was to me of the power that we can do for ourselves or for somebody else to engage in something. And you and I had shared a little bit about something called the state of flow,
Yeah.
where you're so absorbed in the moment and you're getting a release of really good endorphins, and it just helps you overall. And so I saw how that benefited her. And then again, it was years later that I kind of put it together. There is a researcher, his name is Csikszentmihalyi, and he is the one that really writes about the state of flow. And there's another writer, his name's Stuart Brown, who writes about play and the therapeutic benefits of play. And I really embrace a lot of his concepts too,
Yeah.
in the power of how that helps us.
Yeah, I know. On that kind of note, a little bit of a similar story I have. I was telling you guys how when I was in Rancho, it was a really dark time for me. And I had those moments where I got to feel like a kid with the recreational therapy and going to the mall and everything. But other than that, it was still really hard, like that time in my life for me. I'd been in the hospital for 2 months straight, and I was just getting used to living in a hospital at that point. And when I finally was able to move back home, before I moved, the doctor told me, like you're just gonna have to live on the ventilator 24/7. Because even though I tried, sprinting off of it on my own, I could only ever go for like 6 or 7 hours at a time before my lungs kind of gave out and I got tired, too tired to breathe on my own. But funny enough, like the first day I moved back home, I was so excited and so relieved and happy to finally be out of a hospital environment and just be in a regular home with my family and do whatever I wanted to do at the time. Like, I just never went on the ventilator again during the day from that day on. Like, even though
Wow.
I was supposed to be on it 24/7, with little, sprint breaks that I could handle in between. Like, the doctor just told me, straight up, like, you're not gonna be able to be without it for an extended period of time. But it's like you mentioned, like, when you are caught up in activities or when you feel like a sense of awe, of happiness, there's an effect that has on your body, whether it's subconscious or not. And yeah, it's just, yeah, I love it.
Yeah. I had, back to the original question of, don't people kind of question or try to figure out what, a recreation therapist is doing? Couple patients come to mind. One gal from years ago, she had had a stroke and she had a real kind of rough, gravelly voice. And she would say to me years, sometime later, she'd go, I'll never forget you coming to me. And I couldn't talk, I couldn't walk, I couldn't pee, I couldn't do anything. And you were talking to me about going in the pool. I thought you were crazy. And and then she goes, and lo and behold, you taught me how to swim. She goes, I never even knew how to swim. And she was in her 80s, and she just was like this little kid that all of a sudden could move and feel that freedom in the water, and she just loved it.
That's cool.
And before we get too ahead of ourselves, what does a recreational therapist do for those that might not know?
All right. Well, that's an awesome question. Thanks, Uriel. Um, just a little segue, recreation therapists work in a lot of different settings. We're kind of been talking about physical rehabilitation, but they do also, people work in mental health, pediatrics, prisons, community organizations. So I'll speak to what I do. So we're trained, we go to college, I have my undergraduate, my graduate degree in therapeutic recreation, and then you're certified by your state and national professional organization. The American Therapeutic Recreation Association is a good source for anybody that wants to look up further what a recreation therapist does and what their training involves. But so an example of what we do in physical rehab is we receive the orders from the physiatrist, the rehab medical professional, who then we go meet with each person, each patient, and really find out, their background, what their interests are, how they use their time. Find out things like, are they a person that likes to be around other people? Do they do most things, individually? And really try to figure out what motivates the person, what's something special, what's really floats their boat, if you will. And then find out from them what their goals are for their time at rehab. And then we go over some of the things that we can offer them. Sometimes it's related to their hobbies or interests, and sometimes it's completely separate, because sometimes people are so invested in maybe their craft or their skill or their hobby, that if they physically or cognitively are really unable to do that, we're not going to put that right before them, to start out with. We really try to break activities down into components, and maybe try things that are completely out of their wheelhouse. So I'll give you kind of the written statement of what a recreation therapist does. We utilize recreation and other activity and wellness-based interventions to focus on either physical, cognitive, and or psychosocial conditions. So our treatment is designed to rehabilitate a person's level of functioning and independence to promote their health, as well as reduce any activity limitations to participation that life with their illness and or a disabling condition may hold them back. So we really try to help people find ways to re-engage with life and be as active as they can.
Oh, shizzle.
That's the book version, but really, when you think of recreation and one word, that we're in a sense recreating. Oftentimes we're recreating the person's focus on what they can do, on really like identifying their strengths while also in tandem working on their weaknesses.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's really cool.
And we work obviously, with all the other therapists and team members, and that collaboration and the communication we can have amongst each other and with the patient is really pretty significant. And the care that the patients receive from the physiatrist too, and the communication is really, I think, extra special. So yeah, so Uriel, I don't know if I used a lot of words, but examples of things, like say for instance, somebody had a stroke and they are working on using an arm that's currently, they're dealing with some paralysis, or they just aren't able to grip or move their arm. I might have them out at the ping pong table. And whereas, if you say, do you want to play ping pong? First of all, they're probably seated in a wheelchair. So I explain, we're going to be seated. And then I show them how to just manage the ball right in front of them, before we even send it across the table. Or I might use a tennis ball and just do a little more gross motor type of work with them to get the sequencing down, to see what their affected arm is able to do, what kind of grip they have. And then, like with baby steps, just building from there. And with many people, they're, working on their sequencing or their ability to respond accurately to the speed of the ball coming towards them. But I do that all as a progression. So I'll roll the ball. We'll do the rolling for a long time. And then as they get better at that, then we'll start bouncing it. And then I'll hand them a paddle and we'll teach that. So it's really this just trying to identify where a person's at and where you can build from. And the ultimate hope is that they see their progression and then they feel the success. And it doesn't feel any better than when you experience your own success at something.
Yeah, and I bet like you build really close relationships with people doing this. And like that's got to be so weird because at the same time you help them for so long and then they graduate, they leave the hospital, right?
Yep.
Like how long would you say on average you spend with a patient like during their time?
Well, so inpatient for us can be anywhere from like 2 weeks, maybe to a month, roughly. And the recreation therapist often doesn't see people, or generally doesn't see people as frequently as, say, your OT or your PT, because they'll get many sessions in the day. So we're really not only trying to build up their functional skills, but also we give people a lot of education, leisure education, and resource information. So, for instance, yeah, so if somebody's leaving the hospital, we'll tell them about, say, the Outlook Speaker Series or our sports clinics, the rugby, wheelchair rugby. We'll talk about our aquatic center. And I have to say, in terms of things I've done in my entire career, some of the most profound changes and success I've seen with patients is doing aquatic therapy. Um, there's just, that medium of people being able to get in the water and find new mobility that they've been limited by is really exceptional. And then cottage rehab has it where you can also use the pool as a community person. So once you're no longer considered a patient, you can still use that great resource.
It's really cool. You should just go take a dip in the pool, Uri.
I should. I barely touched the water, man. I'm a land person. I'm a land lover.
Ah,
Team Magma.
Oh yeah.
Nobody's gonna get that reference. I don't know why I said it.
I know. I
What's
don't.
a, what's the Pokemon reference?
Pokemon. So, how many patients do you see at like any given time then?
Well, there's several recreation therapists who work at cottage rehab, and so it really depends on the day of the week and how many patients are currently there. But I can see, maybe 13 patients on a weekend, on a Sunday, and then maybe 5 to 6 patients, 5 to 10. It really depends. We see people individually as well as in small groups. Um, so it's varied. It's which is kind of exciting because like no day, every day is a different day. Every day is a different um experience. So it makes it fun. A few of the things that I've been involved in the past with people are things with the Handicap Scuba Diving Association. Got to travel to Alcamal, Mexico, and go with the HSA. And there was a gentleman that I completely was overwhelmed and amazed that he was able to dive. He was a C4 quad. He had two aides that were also divers. And so they would get him in the water and link arms with him. And he would become completely rigid in the water. He'd go into a spasm. And he said that actually helped him be able to dive
Huh.
better.
Was there a reason like medically why he would go rigid?
It was the positioning that he said he would get into, and it would just kick him into a like extensor pattern. But anyway, so my husband was able to film the diving adventure, and That was just one of the trips we went to. The people that we went with, other than two of the people from Santa Barbara, everybody was brand new to us. People with spinal cord injuries. Another gentleman had Guillain-Barré, and then another gentleman had polio, post polio. So it was a very diverse group of divers, and literally talk about a place that levels the playing field and the enjoyment field. Everybody through the HSA had learned ways to dive and safely, and they got certified. So that was a great opportunity that I had enjoyed being a part of. And then,
Okay, kind of a maybe a stupid question. What does HSA stand for?
yeah, the Handicapped Scuba Diving Association.
There we go.
And
Oh,
one of
that's cool.
our occupational therapists that has now retired, her name's Denise Dowd. She was instrumental in teaching many former patients how to then dive, and she's a trained instructor. And she's the one, Dom, I think you referred to in a previous podcast. She also helps with the junior wheelchair sports camp every year,
Mm-hmm.
introduces kids to the idea of scuba diving.
Yep.
That's Denise. Um, and then, so that, yeah, scuba diving. I think a lot of people are familiar with wheelchair racing and a lot of the wheelchair sports. I think the outdoor programs nowadays are really exceptional. And then locally, we have a way that people are getting to have access to the outdoors more through an organization called Nature Tracks. And they use, oh, what's the name of the track?
Freedom Tracks.
Freedom Tracks, thank you. So
Mm-hmm.
they have incorporated that into their programs. So yeah, so growing up and watching my dad, I mean, there was no ADA, there was no Americans with Disabilities Act, there was no real special programming of anything. So I think nowadays that there are those services and whatnot. Hopefully people who are maybe listening to this and have thought that they maybe couldn't do certain things or they didn't have access to it, will just maybe research a little more and persevere and try things that maybe they've considered or out of their reach.
And I'd hope so by now. We've done an episode on, Steve Ferreira and his ability to compete internationally with shot put and discus. And then we had Yuli on talking about power soccer and all the great like adaptive recreational sport resources that are out there. Yeah, if you guys aren't doing sports by now, or something to get out and be active.
Well, and Dom, I'm always picking your brain because um, actually, I think I know this podcast is great, but I'd love to have a whole video of Dom in action because for those of you listening to this guy can um, maneuver his technology like nobody else. And I don't know, I think, oftentimes we'll have patients who, one, are going through an experience of having a trach placed and trying to, that fear that of not being able to breathe well and whatnot. And you've been there, you've done that, you can speak to that. Also people that are now unable to use their hands and are like trying to figure out how they're gonna do things and they just can't even imagine. And so when I think of people who are extremely able, I think you're off the scale, Dom.
Do what I can. Do
Off
what I
the
can.
scale in the good way.
Yeah. Well, it's like I always try to tell people and get the point across. It's regardless of your limitations, there's always usually some way to accomplish what you want to. I'm very experienced in some aspects of that. Like we did that whole episode on gaming, adaptive technology and whatnot. There's plethora of resources out there that you just kind of got to be willing to sift through and figure out, you know, what works best for you. Like I was telling you and Renee in an email, with regards to one of your patients that was looking to get into golfing games, I think. And I was like, yeah, there's this game, like you can play it on the PlayStation, the Xbox, whatever, and there's all these adaptive controllers. Like, uh, since we did the adaptive episode last year, uh, Sony's PS5 adaptive controller has officially come out, so that's on the market now. And you of course have the Xbox One, and there's just a lot you can do with the base console themselves in your settings to adjust the key, the controller bindings, whether that's on your PlayStation, your Xbox, or the bindings on your computer keyboard. Like it's just about taking the time and the effort to really figure it out. So, got to be patient.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think, some people are actually like when, you use the word a person with a disability, and there's other phrases that have been used over the years. When I grew up, I never heard the word in our household of being handicapped or crippled or disabled. It wasn't until I went to college and I started hearing all these labels.
Yeah.
And I thought, what in the world? And, so there is some benefit or I guess need that there are certain descriptors for a person's abilities, but oh dear, I just completely lost my train of thought.
No worries.
Oh, there it is in my train of thought. So yeah, so I think actually, especially during COVID, I think what I observe now is where people have really become less able, quote, more disabled, um, was due to the imposed, isolation, and then oftentimes not moving, not doing much, and becoming um,
Dormant.
weak
Yeah.
and depressed and things like that.
Well, I
So,
think like Uri can speak to that, right? You want to tell your little experience with lockdown and stuff?
It was pretty bad. Because at the time I was going through pinched nerves and a back injury, and because of the stay at home mandate I didn't really go out, so it took a while to get any a form of physical therapy. And I've told Dom this before, but I was bedridden for like 6 months and
oh
just like
my,
doing, yeah, just doing nothing, and all my muscles started atrophying. And then when I finally got around to physical therapy, like at around, it might have been 2021 or early 2022, like I needed a lot of those little exercises thing, and I did that on and off for a couple years. And I've told Dom, I was like, it really sucked because I couldn't play guitar, I couldn't really go on hikes, I couldn't do anything. And what Kay does is extremely important, and what physical therapists do are really important, because the physical therapist, through like exercising and like my own like will strength or willpower, I eventually was able to get a majority of my mobility back and some of my strength back and get back to playing guitar and doing what I normally do. But in terms of the pandemic, I think what happened was, well, in my case, when you're away from friends and you're just home at all the time, you tend to, well, in my case, linger on the things that you can't do.
mhm.
And like Kay said, oh, let's go play ping pong. People focus on oh, I can't stand up. I can't like play ping pong. But then you just start rolling the ball back and forth, no net. And then,
Yeah.
all of a sudden, oh, you're playing ping pong. It's like little things like that.
If someone was to come up to me and say, hey, let's play ping pong. Inside, I may not say it out loud, but my initial like instinct thought process is, how the hell are you expecting to play ping pong? Like,
Yep.
like I'll still probably go through with it and see how it turns out and try it.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's like your first, I don't know the psychology behind it, but knowing your limitations, they're always kind of in the back of your head.
Yeah, and it's probably the hardest obstacle for maybe the patients that Kay have seen, or just anybody that has gone through a traumatic injury where it hurts. And a lot of the time it hurts because your body's been locked in that position. So moving it and all the muscles and all that, they're all tight and, has a bunch of knots or whatever. And moving it is painful. But if you don't move it, it'll get worse. And you have to like stretch and like fully constrict that muscle and do everything you got to do to, to get it back to where it was previously. And when it hurts, a lot of people, I wouldn't say give up, but they just kind of accept it and be like, oh, maybe this is how it's going to be. Like I said, they linger on what they can't do and what they used to do. And that really takes a huge toll on your mental health, which is why things such as like recreational therapy or just the concept of play are really important. Like he's like going to the mall and just doing like kid stuff, you know, like it might not,
Just chilling with the boys eating a Wetzel's pretzels, you know?
yeah, like to like
Yeah.
somebody that might not be too educated on the subject, they might just see it as like, oh, you're just going to the mall. That's like not like this is not whatever, but like, that's the point, you know. It's a form of like mental recreational therapy where it's like you can get out of your like head for a second and just like enjoy life, and then start realizing that like, oh, I can well go through the mall. I can have a good time.
Yeah,
Like what else is and I think that's the hardest thing to overcome is like those little hurdles of just, oh, it hurts. Oh, it's stiff. Oh, I can't move. So maybe I shouldn't. Right. And that's really hard.
You really hit on a lot of different concepts there, Uriel, and a lot of it for any of us. And like you were describing is, the whole mental conversation that we have with ourselves. Um, and sometimes that isn't very uplifting or very productive for us. So we can always be our worst enemies in some ways. So although some people may see us as activity people, it's, using whatever the element is, whatever the activity, to work through some of those self-doubts and those things that hold us back. And I think one of the thoughts or questions was, what do you do if somebody's in bed and they don't want to get out? And again, nobody's forced to have a recreation therapist, but I will just see them where they're at. And if obviously if there's something medical going on, then I'll reschedule. But oftentimes it is depression or really not wanting to deal with what they need to be working on. And so oftentimes I'll just bring something right to where the person is. And um, all of a sudden you'll see this little change in their face or their eyes where for even if it's for a few moments, their whole mindset is looking at or doing whatever we're doing, even if it's from bed with one finger and on one hand. And so giving them that moment, or even just the relationship, I think, for all of us, relationships are so important. And I think developing a relationship and a connection with the person, like I said, right where they're at, even if it's in bed, is really important to their recovery. Um, Obviously, you can tell this is a really personal endeavor for me. And I know as young people are trying to search for, what their path is, mine literally was, I knew some general things, like I wanted to work with people, I wanted to be outdoors. I had previously been a music major and decided I wanted to spend more time with people than with my flute. Anyway, I ran into a professor, and he's the one that introduced me to this whole field, and I love it. And I did a lot of volunteering and things. So any young people out there, I just really encourage you to, do some volunteering, get yourself out there and try different experiences, and hopefully your heart and mind will speak to you and give you some direction.
Heck yeah. All right, final question for you, Kay. To my knowledge, you don't live with a chronic disability or anything, but I give you the pass. You're tight with the disability community. And so because of that, I'm gonna ask you a question that we ask all of our guests. What do you wish more people understood about those living with disabilities?
I would just put out to everybody, anybody on the planet, that you never know what's going on with the next person. You don't know really what they're dealing with. You don't know if they have something chronic. You don't know if they have a mental health issue or a pain issue, or, people that have visual aids, like, or a wheelchair or a cane. Obviously, that's something that everybody is aware of. But you don't know if somebody's had a brain injury. You don't know if somebody's, um, you just don't know. The other thing is, I really hope that I can plant the seed with people who are newly injured, who have children, and they're really stressed about their impact on their family because of their disability. And what that's going to do to their family, what that's going to do to their kids. So I personally feel like, my whole path in life was shaped extremely by my dad's situation and using a wheelchair and whatnot. But I've also seen so many other great examples of people who have gone through rehabilitation, gone through recovery of whatever, and their offspring, their children, really finding some amazing paths in their lives that might not have come out that way. So just maybe trying to take a little pressure off of a family member really stressed about their children. So their children are going to probably do pretty darn good.
If I know one thing, it's that people are adaptable.
There you go. Yes, it's pretty amazing, actually.
All right. Any final plugs you want to make here, Kay?
Well, just a recap, if there is anybody interested in learning more about recreation therapy, the acronym is ATRA, American Therapeutic Recreation Association, or Society Association. Yeah, sorry. And then you can, if you haven't had enough of Dom and I, you're not part of our Outlook speakers, but you can join our Outlook Speakers series talk every month through Cottage Rehabilitation Hospital.
Plus, if you get to see my smiling face.
There you go. You get to see us. And then our next topic actually will be covering the Abilities Expo.
I take a peek at that every now and then. It's really cool, actually.
Yeah, the Abilities Expo. And then we have a nutritionist on in March. So would love to have you, and just want to give a shout out and kudos to you, Dom and Uriel, for all your work you're doing here on the Disability Myth podcast.
Oh, thank you.
It's people like you that make it worth it.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, we've all patted each other on the back. Yahoo.
I'm blushing through my microphone.
Yeah.
All right. Well, if you liked what we had to say today, please leave us that rating, perhaps a nice little review, as always, on Apple Podcasts. And be sure to share with friends and family. If you're not already, be sure to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at the disability myth. All one word. All right. Hope you guys learned about recreational therapy. Hope you have a great day. This episode's coming out on Saturday, so I hope you're having a great weekend. And yeah, peace and love, peeps. May the force be with you.
Bye.